LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the March 12th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 18 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. I'll start with the Alec Baldwin Saturday Night Live Donald Trump impression that was the cold open at the beginning of Saturday Night Live last night. And I'll also have a weekend update clip with some jokes from Saturday Night Live a little bit later in the show. But as usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. You can see the two subtopics I'm covering listed and described down in the video description. And if you're watching the recorded version of the show, you should see some time indexes down there where you can skip to the Obamacare, Trumpcare topic if you get tired of the Russia topic. Those are the two topics. But like I said, I'm starting with this Alec Baldwin clip, and it's sort of like a spoof of Independence Day, where the president has to give this inspiring speech and rally the troops and have the confidence of the nation. And that actually, in a way, relates to the whole Russia and Obama wiretapping scandal, as I'll explain after we watch that clip together over here.
But, Mr. President, what about the aliens? They just vaporized the entire state of California.
So that I won the popular vote?
Sir, please, everyone in California is dead.
Even Arnold?
Sir, yes, we are dealing with a highly advanced species here. They're from Zorblat 9. Their ships are invisible. They're telepathic.
Okay. No, we don't know that they are from Zorblat 9. I've actually heard Zorblat 9 is very beautiful, very fantastic.
Oh my God, does he have business ties on Zorblat 9?
So that's just a quick clip from the whole cold open. There's a link down to the entire video free on YouTube, on the Saturday Night Live YouTube channel if you want to watch the whole thing. I thought that was an important clip because it relates to this whole Russia Obama wiretapping Trump Tower conspiracy theory thing, because when the President of the United States, not just candidate Donald Trump, but President Donald Trump, makes these wild accusations, it cuts down on people's confidence. I mean, not that people have all that much confidence in what the government says to them to begin with, but sometimes the president has to, rally the nation, kind of like in that Independence Day clip. And also, there are other issues, and that's a point that several different guests made talking about this conspiracy theory. The first one I want to show is Senator John McCain talking about the Ukraine. McCain, Ukraine. Sorry about that little slip up there. I noticed someone was doing a drinking game. When I mess up like that, does somebody have to drink? Well, and by the way, I forgot to mention, if you want to see all the clips I'm using, I have this clip list. There's a link down in the video description. You can check my list of clips to see basically where each clip is coming from, and that way you can skip to the next clip if you don't like my commentary and the clip I picked out for this part. But this next clip, like I said, is John McCain talking about this whole wiretapping conspiracy theory and how it hurts the presidency, and I will talk about it a little more after we watch it together here.
A week ago, President Trump made a stunning allegation. He tweeted that President Obama had wiretapped him at Trump Tower during the campaign. On Monday, you said that if President Trump has any information that would indicate that his predecessor wiretapped Trump Tower, he should come forward with the information. The American people deserve it. That's your quote. The White House is supposed to hand over any evidence it has to back this charge to the House Intelligence Committee by tomorrow, but a White House official this morning is suggesting they might not turn anything over. If there's no proof for what the president said, and we know that the FBI director has said it's not true and the former director of national intelligence has said it's not true, should President Trump take back his charge and apologize to President Obama and to the American people?
Well, President Trump has to provide the American people, not just the Intelligence Committee, but the American people with evidence that his predecessor, former President of the United States, was guilty of breaking the law, because our Director of National Intelligence, General Clapper, testified that there was absolutely no truth to that allegation. So I think the president has one of two choices: either retract or to provide the information that the American people deserve, because if his predecessor violated the law, President Obama violated the law, we've got a serious issue here, to say the least.
But there's no one I've heard who has any information relating to the FBI or intelligence, including Vice President Pence, Sean Spicer, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who has said that they know of any information that backs this up. Do you have any reason to think that this charge is true?
I have no reason to believe that the charge is true, but I also believe that the President of the United States could clear this up in a minute. All he has to do is pick up the phone, call the director of the CIA, director of national intelligence, and say, okay, what happened? Because they certainly should know whether the former President of the United States was wiretapping Trump Towers.
Do you have any concern about the constant barrage of conspiracy theories we keep hearing from the president?
Well, the president obviously has a unique style. He was elected President of the United States, and I'm not telling him how he should conduct that presidency, but I do believe that on an issue such as this, accusing a former President of the United States of doing something which is not only illegal, but just unheard of, then that requires corroboration. And I'll let the American people be the judge, but this is serious stuff, Jake, because if true, or the allegation is left out there, it undermines the confidence the American people have in the entire way that the government does business.
Mexico's top diplomat came to...
So you can see Senator John McCain in that answer being a little more circumspect. I'm going to show an earlier clip from his interview later in this topic where he talks about the contacts between the Trump family and the, I guess, Trump world and Russia and Ukraine, and that's what I was thinking about before when I said Senator John McCain instead of John McCain. But the Democrat who is the highest ranking, or I should say the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, was also a guest on one of the Sunday morning news analysis shows. This is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where he goes further than I think John McCain went in that last answer, where John McCain is almost giving the president the benefit of the doubt. But here I think Adam Schiff makes the argument much more strongly that what Trump is doing is undermining the credibility of the presidency, and that's going to be something he's going to need to use at some point. And we can talk about that clip also together after we watch it together.
You just heard Senator Cotton right there. It sounds like he doesn't expect the Justice Department to come forward with the evidence of whether or not President Obama ordered a wiretap on President Trump tomorrow. You've set the deadline for tomorrow, you and your colleagues. Do you expect the Justice Department to meet it?
Well, I don't expect we're going to see any evidence of this either. I agree with Tom Cotton. You know, there are one of two possibilities here. Either the president quite deliberately, for some reason, made up this charge, or perhaps more disturbing, the president really believes this. And here's where I think it's consequential, George. If 6 months from now the president should say that Iran is cheating on the nuclear agreement, if he's making that up, it's a real problem. If he's not making up and it's true, it's an even bigger problem, because the question is, would people believe him? Would American people believe him? Would people around the world believe him? And that has real-world consequences.
So are there any consequences for the Justice Department if they don't come forward with this information?
Well, first of all, is there information to be produced is one question. But more than that, we're going to have an open hearing on March 20th. We're going to be able to ask the director of the FBI, among others, is there any truth to this? Have they seen any evidence of this? They would be in a position to have to know. And I think on March 20th, if not before, we'll be able to put this to rest. But I don't think anyone really has any question about this, George. The only question is why the president would make up such a thing.
So you believe that FBI Director James Comey, who is coming before your committee on the 20th, will answer this in public on that day?
I do. And, you know, if the press reports are accurate that he asked the Department of Justice to knock this down, and they refused for whatever reason, he may welcome the opportunity, but he'll certainly have that on March 20th.
You also heard Senator Cotton say he was citing the what the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, said last week. Not only had he not seen evidence of this wiretapping, but he also said he's seen no evidence of any kind of collusion or cooperation between Trump associates and Russians. Have you seen any kind of evidence like that?
Well, I was surprised to see the director state that so categorically, and I think, you know, here's where we are in the investigation, George, and obviously I can't talk about particular evidence, but it's not unlike the 9/11 investigation where you had a joint inquiry in that case and an independent commission. They were looking at who was responsible, and obviously it was al-Qaeda responsible, but they were also looking at whether the Saudi government, to use parallel terms, colluded or had some kind of coordination or involvement in the attack on 9/11. Now, at the end of their investigation, they found some circumstantial evidence that indicated that may be true, but they couldn't corroborate it. I wouldn't want to reach a conclusion at the outset of our investigation as to whether we're going to be able to demonstrate collusion. Maybe we will, and maybe we won't. Maybe it existed, maybe it didn't. But I do think it's our obligation to do everything possible in as nonpartisan a basis as possible to answer those very important questions. And I wouldn't start out by concluding one way or the other.
You also heard Senator Cotton say it may not be.
So, like I said, that's the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, and not only did he expand on what John McCain said and what was basically the point of that Saturday Night Live clip, that when Donald Trump engages in these wild conspiracy theories, that he loses credibility with the American people. And Adam Schiff said that what happens if he wants to say Iran's cheating on the treaty? How are the American people going to believe him? Although it's not like I think we're like way past that point with Donald Trump anyway. And I think a lot of people in the United States are way past that for any president or any government official, at least without a heavy dose of skepticism, which may be why Donald Trump has been so successful. But I also thought it was interesting that Adam Schiff set this March 20th deadline. That's sort of like news, or I didn't know that till I heard this interview, that James Comey would be coming before the committee publicly on March 20th. And Adam Schiff is assuming he's going to answer the question as to whether there's any evidence of wiretapping of Trump Tower. Now, Senator Rand Paul, I'm going to show a clip of him in a couple minutes. It's the last clip on this topic, where he has this other theory under Section 702 of the of FISA, which I'll talk about when I get to that. But I also want to show a couple other Republicans. First, the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, he's given a question by the host of CBS's Face the Nation, John Dickerson, that is kind of along this same line I've been discussing about the loss of credibility when the president makes wild accusations. In this case, he's talking about in terms of facts on healthcare and policy, because this is after he asked Paul Ryan several questions about Obamacare and Trumpcare and the healthcare debate. And you'll see Paul Ryan, he does admit that there's no evidence that Obama wiretapped Trump Tower, but he seems like very sympathetic to Donald Trump and why he's so frustrated with the leaks and the Russia story. And I will discuss that a little more with you after we watch that 2-minute CBS clip together here.
For you, though, you and I have talked about the importance of public figures making a case. You're doing it right now with healthcare to the public based on a set of facts. You make your argument about your facts. The other person makes their argument, and the people make a decision. How can that happen in a situation where you have a president who is saying things where you've got the director of the FBI, you've got the former DNI?
There's been a lot of reporting about this. Remember, there was an investigation by the Intelligence Committee.
But not that Barack Obama wiretapped Donald Trump.
Well, that's what the Intelligence Committee is going to investigate. There's been a lot of reporting about this all over the place. So the key is get to the bottom of it, make sure the Intelligence Committee investigates these things. And I think if we get through all of this investigation, I think we will discover that they didn't do those things. But Russia did try to meddle with our elections.
But this is a serious charge. The president of the United States is saying his predecessor put illegal wiretaps on him. That's not the basket of charges and things that have been discussed in the papers before. That is a new thing. And I wonder if you feel the way Senator Sass does, the way Senator Graham does, which is when a president makes this kind of a bombshell charge, that you can't just wait for the committees to kind of get to the work. This isn't the kind of thing you want to just linger out there. What do you feel about that?
Well, that's outside of my control, what is tweeted or what isn't tweeted. We're focused on healthcare. The president's focused on healthcare. I think he's frustrated with this whole thing about Russia. I think he's frustrated with selective leaks coming from parts of government that malign his campaign. The reason why we think the intelligence committees are the ones who should do this is the last thing we want to do is compromise the sources and methods of our intelligence gathering so that we get to the bottom of all of this. But yeah, there's been a lot of selective leaking, I think in many ways meant to malign the presidency, meant to get him off to a bad start, and he's expressing that frustration.
You're the member in the gang, so-called Gang of Eight, the top leaders who get this information. Have you seen anything to suggest there are wiretaps?
No.
Could you clear up this question of wiretaps?
Well, again, I don't want to get ahead of the intelligence committees. I don't want to get ahead of the intelligence committees and their thorough investigation.
And we may.
So that was a very diplomatic answer there from the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, I think, where he didn't call Donald Trump crazy and didn't call it a wild accusation. He was very sympathetic, like I said before I showed the clip, to Donald Trump's frustration with the Russia stories and the leaks. And I don't know. I think it's just a sad comment on the partisanship that all the, they were so crazy about Benghazi, and then when there's all this evidence of a real scandal, they're so slow to actually investigate it. And I've noticed something of the opposite, if you've been watching the Rachel Maddow show, like I often do, and this week there have been very long segments on the whole Russia story that in some ways reminds me of the way Fox News used to cover Benghazi. Now, I actually have a lot more trust and faith in Rachel Maddow, just based on having watched her stories over the years, that I think, she's definitely a liberal, but she's smart and has integrity in terms of trying to report stories honestly, even though she has her own perspective on them and she's a commentator. But I think the difference between the Fox News Benghazi and the MSNBC Russia stories this week, if there's going to be a difference, will be whether there turns out to be an actual scandal there or not. And it does come down to this issue of collusion is where we are. There's already evidence of Russian interference in the American elections that both sides seem to agree on pretty much. And then there's mounting evidence of contacts between the Trump campaign and Trump world and the Trump family and these people in Russia, Russian intelligence, Russian officials, Russian business people, etc. And then what's left is what Adam Schiff was also admitting, that so far we don't know if there was collusion, if the contacts meant that there was collusion in the interference. And I don't know if there was interference in terms of the election, or there was collusion in terms of the interference with the election. I think the collusion may have more to do with business deals. That's just my theory, not based on any evidence, but just based on having watched so much of this for so long. If it's going to go anywhere, I think that's probably where it's going to go. And some of that's been revealed in the Rachel Maddow show investigations, if you watch them this week. But I want to get on to a clip from Senator Tom Cotton, where he uses this whole lack of evidence so far of collusion as like a dodge to get away from trying to really expand on the idea that there's no evidence of any wiretapping either. And this is talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week this morning. And you'll see George Stephanopoulos starts off asking him, because he's on the Senate Intelligence Committee, if he knows of any evidence of that Obama wiretapped Trump Tower. He doesn't. And then he tries to dodge the question. And, I'll talk about it a little more after we watch it together here.
Intelligence Committee, I want to switch gears right now. Have you seen any evidence that President Obama ordered a wiretap on President Trump during the campaign?
George, I have not seen that evidence, but I want to go back to something that Barack Obama's Director of National Intelligence said last weekend. He said he had not seen evidence of that either, but more importantly, he said he had seen no evidence of cooperation between any Trump associates and Russian officials. I don't think that got the attention it deserved. The Director of National Intelligence under Barack Obama would be in a much better position than any senator or any congressman to know such things. And while our review on the Intelligence Committee will proceed in an orderly and deliberate fashion, I think we should pay heed to a man who said he saw no evidence of such cooperation, rather than do what some Democrats have done, which is spin wild-eyed, hair-on-fire conspiracy theories.
And I am going to ask Congressman Schiff about that coming up. But But if the Justice Department or President Trump don't provide any evidence of this wiretap, does President Trump owe President Obama an apology?
President Trump said last weekend that he wanted the intelligence committees in the Senate and the House to take up this matter as part of our broader inquiry into Russia's activities in our political system last year. We're going to do exactly that. I hope that we get to the bottom of all these matters and that we make all those conclusions public to the American people.
But can't the president get this information himself? And I know the intelligence committees have asked the Justice Department to come forward by tomorrow and say, is there any evidence?
George, there are reasons why the intelligence community, in particular the FBI, which often operates in front of the FISA court in conjunction with the Department of Justice, is reluctant to make such public statements because it could reveal what we do know and what we don't know and how we know those things, and that's not something that we want our adversaries to understand. Through a deliberate and careful process of examining all the intelligence at issue here, and then determining with the executive branch what we can declassify, I think the intelligence committees are in the best position to make those decisions.
Your Republican colleague, Senator.
So there you see another Republican who is making excuses for Donald Trump and his wild accusations about the wiretapping of Trump Tower, kind of like Paul Ryan did, and also I wanted to show that not all Republicans were necessarily going to be on Donald Trump's side, and that's really important because with Republican control of the House and the Senate, the only way that Trump is going to get into any trouble through investigations or eventually for him to be impeached and removed, which is that's way off, way off. That would require many more shoes to drop, as they say, but for that to happen, you need Republicans to not side with Donald Trump. And if you listen to Senator John McCain answering this next question, and like I said, this is from earlier in the interview than the last question I showed, and here I think he gets really animated. One of my favorite parts of this, I talked about waiting for other shoes to drop. He refers to them at the Russian scandal, that it, like another shoe to drop from this centipede, which gives you an idea of how strongly he feels about what, in opposition to some of what Donald Trump's been doing. And also, you'll notice that it starts off with a question here from Jake Tapper. This is on CNN State of the Union. And Jake Tapper actually asks him about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's ties to Turkey and how he just retroactively announced that he was a foreign agent for Turkey while he was part of the campaign and National Security Advisor, or he quit right before he was National Security Advisor. But that was like quite a revelation. But John McCain doesn't even answer that question. He like totally pivots to the whole Russia question and talks about Ukraine. You remember John McCain went to Ukraine during the uprising there. I'm almost at the 4-year anniversary of my Sunday Live Clip Roundup, so you may remember I actually covered on a Sunday show that uprising and John McCain reporting from Kiev, I think it was, with the bells tolling in the background. And anyway, here is John McCain showing why Donald Trump may eventually get in trouble with Republicans on this whole Russia scandal. And here you'll see John McCain specifically talking about all the contacts between the Trump world and Russia in this clip.
General Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor for President Trump, was working as a foreign agent last year while he was advising President Trump's campaign. Flynn notified the transition team and the White House lawyers about the work he had done for Turkey, but this information was not disclosed to the public, nor did he file the proper paperwork until this week. Does this trouble you at all that the national security advisor had been, until recently, a paid advocate for a foreign government?
Jake, there's a lot of things about our relations with Russia that trouble me a lot. For example, why was the provision in the Republican platform that called for the provision of defensive weapons to Ukraine after being invaded by Russia, why was that taken out of the Republican platform? Clearly, it was not the will of most Republicans. There's a lot of aspects of this whole relationship with Russia and Vladimir Putin that requires further scrutiny, and so far I don't think the American people have gotten all the answers. In fact, I think there's a lot more shoes to drop from this centipede.
Do you think General Flynn advocating on behalf of Turkey in that way was part of this whole Russian situation?
I don't know. I know that he was in Moscow and had a dinner with Putin, and I'm not sure that on its face is anything wrong. But there continues to surface communications between not just General Flynn but other members of the Trump family, quote, and associates that Mr. Manafort's relationship with Yanukovych, the stooge of Vladimir Putin that they finally threw out of Ukraine, is still has a lot of questions to be answered, and so far they're not being answered.
Longtime Trump confidant Roger Stone told the Washington Times on Friday that he had exchanged messages online with Guccifer 2.0. He called them completely innocuous. But Guccifer 2.0, as you know, is the entity that claims to be behind the hack of the Democratic National Committee. Stone has also tweeted that he had a back channel to Julian Assange during the campaign. Do you think Roger Stone should be called to testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee hearings?
Oh, I think, obviously, I think he and others need to be questioned. There's no doubt that Mr. Stone was closely associated again with Mr. Yanukovych, who was, thanks to the rising up of millions of Ukrainian people, was thrown out of office at the Maidan, this demonstration in the square of national will of Ukrainian people that is as impressive as anything I've ever seen. This whole issue of the relationship with the Russians and who communicated with them and under what circumstances clearly cries out for investigation. But I would also point out we should not assume guilt until we have a thorough investigation. I'm not judging anyone guilty.
Speaking of assuming guilt...
And actually, that speaking of assuming guilt is the earlier clip that I showed of Senator John McCain. And I thought, like I said, he was much more critical of Donald Trump in that answer than in the previous answer about the wiretapping. And he was pretty adamant that there were some very mysterious contacts between Trump world and the Russians. Yes, he believes that they require some sort of investigation, and the fact that there are Republicans that believe that means that maybe there will be investigation. But before I leave the topic of Russia and also the wild accusation from Donald Trump that Obama wiretapped Trump Tower, I wanted to show this one clip from Senator Rand Paul. And in this clip, Senator Rand Paul gives a theory as to why why there may be evidence of this, wiretapping of Trump Tower that doesn't actually involve wiretapping of Trump Tower, but could involve, wiretapping by the NSA. And it involves Section 702 of the FISA Amendment Act, or the latest version of FISA that I will explain after Rand Paul kind of explains it in this final clip on the Russia topic over here.
Wiretapping, because I know that's an issue you care a lot about. There are your colleagues, Lindsey Graham and Senator Sass, have said that this claim the president made about being wiretapped as a candidate by President Obama, they say this is too incendiary to wait for the committees to adjudicate it, that the president should bring forward whatever evidence he has. Does that bother you, matter to you?
Well, I think the first thing to realize is that I think everybody's been getting the story wrong. I doubt that Trump was a target directly of any kind of eavesdropping, but I'm not saying it didn't happen. I think there's a very good chance it does. I don't have any special information, but the way it works is the FISA court, through Section 702, wiretaps foreigners and then listens to Americans. It's a backdoor search of Americans, and because they have so much data, they can type Donald Trump into their vast resources of people they're tapping overseas, and they get all of his phone calls. And so they did this to President Obama. They 1,227 times eavesdrops on President Obama's phone calls, then they mask him. But here's the problem, and General Hayden said this the other day. He said even low-level employees can unmask the caller. That's probably what happened to Flynn. They're not targeting Americans, they're targeting foreigners, but they're doing it purposefully to get to Americans.
Okay, so your point is the president would have been caught in a net, or excuse me, candidate Trump caught in a net but not targeted directly.
Or his associates, but it's very dangerous because they're revealing that now to the public.
All right, thank you, Senator. We ran out of time.
And I think they're actually, of all the theories I've heard as to how Obama ordered the wiretapping of Trump Tower, you know, all the theories that might possibly make that even a grain, you know, true, or have a grain of salt of truth in there, that's the one that makes the most sense to me, because I remember making videos back on the changes to FISA back when Obama was running for president in 2008, and he took this, he actually voted for the FISA Amendment Act, and it was, I thought, really bad, because it used to be that if either side of the conversation was in the United States, that meant that they had to get a warrant with with probable cause, you know, for an individual. But you know, these FISA warrants have a lot lower standard of proof, and that and now with the amendments, it's what Senator Rand Paul was saying, that now if the target is a foreign person or a foreign, you know, and it's for the purpose of collecting foreign intelligence, if one side of the conversation is in the U.S., it doesn't really matter. It used to be where the collection was also, like if you had a CIA agent in the Kremlin bugging the phones in the Kremlin, and someone in the Kremlin called in the United States, the fact that the bugging was taking place in the Kremlin meant, you know, they didn't need a warrant, because you don't need a warrant to bug the Kremlin. But now they can actually, if as long as the person is a target, even if they're collecting the intelligence in the United States, if the foreign person is the target and one end isn't in the United States, it doesn't matter where they're collecting it, or they have a lot more leeway than they used to. And so I think there may be something to what Senator Rand Paul was saying there. But I'd have to go back. It's been a long time. Like I said, I made that video in 2008, and I haven't really looked at Section 702 in a while. I didn't have time to today, but maybe that's where this is going, and that's the whole basis of the wild accusations from Donald Trump on the wiretapping of Trump Tower, or Obama ordering the wiretapping of Trump Tower, which of course that didn't happen. Obama didn't order the wiretapping of Trump Tower, but you know, sometimes there turns out to be something behind some of these weird things Donald Trump says, so, but maybe not. We'll have to wait and see, and maybe we'll hear more at this March 20th hearing where James Comey is going to testify publicly to the House Intelligence Committee. But so now I want to move on to the second topic, which was actually had more coverage. It was hard to find the Russia clips that I picked out for you, but there were tons and tons of clips on Trumpcare, if that's what you want to call it, or some people are calling it RYANCARE. On MSNBC, AM Joy, they were calling it TRYANCARE, because it's Trump and Ryan, although my favorite name for it came from the series of jokes on Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update. You'll see there's some Michael Che jokes and some Colin Jost jokes, and I have a couple points I want to make about them after we watch those jokes together, as well as an even better name for Trumpcare over in this clip.
I think Republicans made their best effort to unite the country by presenting a new health care plan that everybody could hate together. Democrats are upset because a lot of poor people could lose their coverage. Conservatives are upset because it doesn't repeal Obamacare enough. And I'm upset because it still doesn't cover medicinal cocaine. And I got a screenplay to finish. I spent the money. The White House is officially calling the bill the American Health Care Act, and not as many people in the media have been calling it Trumpcare, or as they probably should be calling it, Don't Care. Are you old and poor and losing your coverage? Don't care. How bad does something have to be for Trump not to want to put his name on it? This guy once put his name on a Ponzi scheme. But even for this, he's like, I don't want to take all the credit. That'd be like if Kanye's next album was called But Enough About Me.
It was estimated that the Republicans' health care plan gives a $400 billion tax break to the rich, while the poor will receive a box of generic Band-Aids and a travel-sized bottle of Airborne. The Republican plan to replace Obamacare would also cut funding to Planned Parenthood. So you might not get to keep your health care, but you'll have to keep something else.
So I like most of those jokes. I like the Don't Care name for Trumpcare, RYANCARE. I think Don't Care might be the name that should stick, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. The other thing I noticed about that series of jokes, and the joke I liked best was when he was talking about medicinal cocaine and, you know, that he needs to finish his script. I already spent the money. That was my favorite line. Already spent the money. But the other, like, political commentary I wanted to make on that clip was that a lot of the problems that they made jokes about or mentioned in that clip from Weekend Update are the Democratic problems, the problems that Democrats have with the bill, not so much the problems that the Republicans have. So, I don't know, is that evidence for, like, left-wing bias at Saturday Night Live, or maybe just left-wing bias for the several people who wrote that joke? I don't know if it goes beyond, wrote the jokes that you just saw there, but you can let me know what you think about that in the comment section too. I've been trying to read your comments along the way, and I actually just got this whole super chat thing this week because they got rid of fan funding and replaced it with super chat for me, and I don't really know how that works, and I don't think anyone's used it yet, but if I do start understanding how it works, maybe I'll make some rules for that and how I'll respond to anyone who... I mean, I don't think I can promise to respond to any paid question, but I might actually see it when I don't always see all the questions. I might, but in order to know that and tell you that, I have to have someone use it. So, and I really don't like the whole idea. I actually decide which comments I feature and answer during the show based on how much I think they increase my argument that it's a fair use media criticism and political analysis show, because the live comments are also commenting on the clips I'm using. And so if it's a good comment on a clip, or it in some way helps with my commentary on a clip, that I think increases my fair use argument. That's really how I choose the comments that I feature when I get a chance to feature them. So I don't know that Super Chat's really going to change that. But anyway, I'm going off on a digression here. I now want to show a couple news reports on Obamacare, Trumpcare, Don't Care, whatever you want to call it. The first one is the shorter one from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where they actually mixed in the whole wiretapping, wild accusation thing and the loss of credibility, and the whole Trumpcare challenge that the Trump administration is facing. And they mixed them together by calling them that now Trump is facing basically the establishment striking back on both of those issues. And I'll show you that brief news. Well, this is about a minute and 45 seconds that I'll talk about after we watch it together here.
Trump's moment of truth. 50 days in, he has smashed convention, shocked official Washington, and created a chaotic new normal in the White House. This week, official Washington poised to strike back. It has been 8 days now since the president leveled that explosive charge against President Obama, accusing him of ordering illegal wiretaps against the Trump campaign, a claim that President Obama and numerous government officials call flat out untrue. In those 8 days, Trump has offered zero evidence and refused to answer questions like these from our White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Press. Thank you. You guys, please. Thank you, Press. Mr. President, any proof at all on the Thank you. Thank you, Press.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much, Press.
Thank you. Please head out behind you. Thank you.
Are you going to provide any
Please
proof?
head out behind.
And now top members of Congress have asked Trump's Justice Department to either put up the evidence or shoot it down. The deadline tomorrow. Also tomorrow, a key moment for President Trump's promise to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something far better. Here he is exactly 1 year ago in St. Louis.
Obamacare is a disaster. We're going to repeal it and replace. Going to repeal it and replace with something great, less expensive and far better. We're going to have great health care. And you know the amazing thing? It's going to cost, very amazing, it's going to cost the country less, and it's going to cost the people less. I mean, how good is that?
Better care, lower costs, everyone covered. That is Trump's promise. Tomorrow, the Independent Congressional Budget Office expected to go public with assessment of whether the legislation President Trump is backing now will meet the promises he made during the campaign. We'll cover it all today. And
So that's the ABC report, like I said, about 1 minute and 40 seconds. And you can tell me what you think about the mixture of the establishment strikes back angle there, both on the CIA and the deep state, whatever, that is going to strike back on the Trump Tower wiretapping claim this week, and then all the problems that people have with Trumpcare, or whatever you want to call it. The American Health Care Act is what I guess it's actually called. And I thought that George Stephanopoulos really did a good job as a critical journalist, setting up Donald Trump's promises from the campaign that he can't possibly keep. And that's one of the things you'll see in a lot of the dodges I'm going to show in a few minutes from Republicans and the Health and Human Services Secretary and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, both from the Trump administration. But before I get to all those clips, I want to show one more news story. This is a much more detailed story about where all the attacks are coming from on Trumpcare, or whatever you want to call it. I'm sorry, I keep saying that. This is from NBC's Meet the Press, and you'll see Chuck Todd starts off with a little bit of a dig about how complicated it turns out that healthcare is, because remember Donald Trump said in the last week or so, who knew? Nobody knew how complicated healthcare was, because all he thought he had to do was replace it with something terrific. But anyway, it turns out there's more to it than that, as NBC's Meet the Press explained in about a 3.5-minute news story that I thought was a really good coverage. And this is the last news clip before I get to the interview clips. So this is, I think, the most comprehensive coverage of what's going on with Trumpcare, which I will discuss with you after we watch it together here.
Well, who knew that health care could be so complicated? House Republicans revealed their replaced version of repeal and replace of Obamacare. To decidedly mixed reviews, President Trump offered qualified support, allowing that changes could still be made to the bill. But the proposal got hit on all sides by Freedom Caucus Republicans who say the bill doesn't go far enough in eliminating Obamacare, to moderate Republicans who say it goes too far, and to Democrats who are in effect folding their arms and just saying no. The left-leaning Brookings Institution predicts that at least 15 million people will lose coverage under this Republican plan. Many powerful healthcare organizations came out against it this week, and the White House is already casting doubt on the expected cost estimates to be made by the Congressional Budget Office.
If you're looking to the CBO for accuracy, you're looking in the wrong place.
Well, those numbers should be coming out tomorrow or the next day. Still, proponents argue that any new plan, even if not perfect, would be a vast improvement over the current Obamacare system. And the time, they say, to make any sweeping change is right now.
This is the closest we will ever get to repealing and replacing Obamacare.
Republicans racing the political clock to push through a health care replacement bill have a message.
Republicans unified.
We are unified. We are unified.
We're really excited about the unified votes.
But the fight over health care is exposing divisions within the Republican Party, between small government conservatives, swing state moderates, and a president who ran as a populist and is governing as a nationalist. This week, 2 key House committees approved the plan to overhaul the Affordable Care Act, but not before conservatives rushed out to pan the bill. Both in the House.
This is just Obamacare with a different label.
It appears to be the largest welfare program ever proposed by Republicans in the history of our country.
And in the Senate.
The bill as written is not going to pass the Senate.
Simply would not pass the Senate.
It's dead on arrival.
Conservatives say tax credits are a government giveaway, and they want Obamacare's Medicaid expansion phased out more quickly. Then there are the Republican moderates, meeting fierce opposition at town halls. They are pushing back on the plan to phase out the Medicaid expansion by 2020 and to cap federal funding for Medicaid enrollees.
In Ohio, we have this expanded Medicaid that is critical to covering people who otherwise would not be getting health care.
Pulling the rug out from under these vulnerable populations is not really the direction we want to go.
During the campaign, the president even was open to further expanding Medicaid.
We will
expand Medicaid?
We will. You can do it through Medicaid.
Yeah.
You can do it through some other way. But I'm just saying, very simple. And this has nothing to do with this has to do with humanity. This has to do with having a heart.
And in January, Mr. Trump promised insurance for everybody, telling the Washington Post there was a philosophy in some circles that if you can't pay for it, you don't get it.
That's not going to happen with us. But conservatives want to scrap Obamacare completely, and they call the current House Republican bill Obamacare Light. Will the president use his own political capital to insist that Republicans put aside ideological differences and support the bill? On the campaign trail, Mr. Trump promised he would own health care.
We'll call it Donald Care.
But this week, Mr. Trump has preferred to stay behind the scenes, schmoozing lawmakers, but so far not twisting arms. It was Vice President Mike Pence in Kentucky on Saturday selling health care, not the president.
And for us to seize this opportunity to repeal and replace Obamacare once and for all, we need every Republican in Congress, and we're counting on Kentucky.
Yesterday afternoon,
So, like I said, I thought that was fairly comprehensive coverage from NBC and pretty critical coverage of President Trump and the way he's, well, I don't know if you see it as critical or, I mean, I think it's accurate that he is kind of waiting to see what happens, and I think he hasn't really taken a firm position. He's letting Paul Ryan and the House Republican leadership lead on this right now, and he may like switch sides, or he's open to negotiation, and he's like sending different signals, like a meeting he had with Elijah Cummings, a clip I didn't take, where he talked about trying to make drug companies have to negotiate prices more, but that's not in the bill. And so there are all sorts of things going on that I think was pretty well covered in that NBC clip. And so now I want to get to some of the interview clips, most of which are Republicans talking about how they're not going to be able to support the bill. There are a couple administration officials who are also Republicans. But before I get to all the Republicans, I want to get to Senator Bernie Sanders basically explaining why Democrats oppose the bill. And like I said, when I showed the Saturday Night Live Weekend Update clips, I think you'll see that a lot of the issues raised by Weekend Update are the same issues raised by Bernie Sanders. And I also thought it's kind of funny that the question that John Dickerson asked Bernie Sanders here is if the bill is going to pass, and he's like, oh, I hope not. But he doesn't really answer the question as to whether the bill is going to pass the Senate and get 51 votes. He just explains why he hopes it doesn't pass, which, you know, that's information that is important information, but not the answer to the question over in this clip.
House Speaker Paul Ryan thinks that his legislation can get 51 votes in the Senate. What do you think?
Well, I sure hope not, John. It is an absolute disaster. It is a disgrace. And by the way, this really has nothing to do with health care. What this has everything to do with is a massive shift of wealth from working people and middle-income people to the very richest people in this country. It is a $275 billion tax break for the top 2%. Millionaires will get about $50,000 a year in tax breaks, while at the same time, some 5 to 10 million people are going to lose their health insurance. Premiums are going to soar. The AARP says that if you are 64 years of age and you're making about $25,000 a year, you're going to pay up to $7,000 more for your health insurance. They're going to defund Planned Parenthood, deny over 2 million women the right to choose the health care that they need. They're going to decimate Medicaid, which is why the American Medical Association, the AMA, and the American Hospital Association oppose it, in addition to the AARP. This is a disgrace. And by the way, they are so cowardly that they want to go forward before the CBO even gives an estimate as to what it will cost and how many people will lose their insurance.
Well, a lot of charges there.
Now, actually, supposedly the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, is supposedly going to give its analysis tomorrow, or as early as tomorrow, as to how much it's going to cost and how many people it's going to cover. And it's probably going to cost a lot of people more, and it's probably going to make a lot of people lose their coverage. Both things that were not readily admitted by Trump administration officials on the Sunday morning shows this morning, starting with former Congressman and now Secretary of Health and Human Services Tom Price, who you'll see when Chuck Todd tries to pin him down on whether anyone is going to be worse off under Trumpcare, or whatever you want to call it. Donaldcare, I guess, is what Trump said during the campaign he wanted it to be called. But whether anyone will be worse off under DonaldCare. He won't really answer the question, and I think this is actually a good setup that Chuck Todd has going here, because he has some statistics or some numbers, I should say, that show how one possible, one person who's affected by the new healthcare bill will get $8,000 less a year in order to pay for health insurance. So how can they be better off? This is someone who's going to be worse off, and you'll see how Tom Price tries to dodge the whole thing by saying, oh, it's not about who's covered, it's about access and more choices. But, how can you have more choices when you have like $4,000 instead of $12,000 to buy health insurance? You can let me know what you think after we watch that clip together over here.
The aspect a little bit. First of all, can you say for certain that once this bill is passed, nobody will be worse off financially when it comes to paying for health care?
Well, I'll tell you right now, there are a lot of people that are worse off right now when they're paying for health care, and they aren't getting the care that they need. Again, the premiums are up and deductibles are up. If you're an individual out there making $50,000, $60,000 and your deductible is $8,000, $10,000, $12,000, you may have that insurance card, but you don't have coverage. And I hear from my former colleagues all the time about patients who come into their office and they recommend something for them, and they're not able to get it because the deductible is so high.
But I noticed you ducked the aspect of whether you can guarantee that nobody will be worse off financially.
I firmly believe that nobody will be worse off financially in the process that we're going through, understanding that they'll have choices that they can select the kind of coverage that they want for themselves and for their family, not that government forces them to buy. So there's cost that needs to come down, and we believe we're going to be able to do that through this system. There's coverage that's going to go up. Remember, Chuck, there are 20 million folks right now in this nation who said to the federal government, phooey. I'll pay a penalty or I'll take a waiver. I'm not even going to get coverage in the system that we currently have. That may be a system that works for government or insurance, but it doesn't work for people.
So you believe
we need a system that works for people.
You believe your system's going to add an additional 20 million over the 20 million that have had expanded coverage? You really believe that?
We believe that. I believe, and the president believes firmly that if you create a system that's accessible for everybody and you provide the financial feasibility for everybody to get coverage, that we have a great opportunity to increase coverage over where we are right now, as opposed to where the line is going right now, where people are losing coverage and we're going to have fewer individuals covered than we do currently.
All right, let me go to this financial feasibility issue here, because in Fayette County, West Virginia, this is one example. Kaiser Family Foundation estimates the following, that the $4,000 tax credit that a 60-year-old making $30,000 a year that will get under the American Health Care Act is almost $8,000 less than they would get under Obamacare. This is a county, by the way, that voted overwhelmingly for President Trump. The point is this, is you say this is going to make it more affordable and access to coverage under this plan in this county, in this state, less money and more expensive for these folks.
That's it. That's looking at it in a silo. If you look at it in the way that the market will allow, then, for individuals to have choices, who knows what that 60-year-old wants? I know that the federal government doesn't know what that 60-year-old wants. I know that he or she knows what he or she wants. And the way that you provide a decreasing cost and choices for folks, you make it so that the system can actually be responsive to that individual. That's the way you drive down costs.
Why not means test?
I don't know, are you buying that answer there from Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, that even though this hypothetical person in West Virginia is getting $4,000 a year instead of $12,000 a year to buy their health care, that somehow they're still going to have more choices? That seems like that's a choice limiting factor, but you can let me know what you think down in the comments section. And I think, like I said, that Chuck Todd really set up that question well and had like the numbers ready from that hypothetical recipient of health care. But if you like those numbers, you're really going to like the data download that some people think is like Super Mario battle music in the background or something. But there's been a lot of dispute about that. I don't think it actually matches exactly, but it kind of sounds a little bit like it while he's showing all of the data. But it's all the numbers showing how the people who are going to lose out on Trumpcare, or whatever you want to call it, are actually going to be the poor, non-college educated, white, Rust Belt people who put Donald Trump into office. And, you know, I saw down in the comment section a bunch of you were trying to come up with other names for Trumpcare or RYANCARE or DONTCARE. Here's one from Witless X called it RichCare, and you'll see from some of the numbers in the data download, and then from the question I show after that to the director of the Office of Management and Budget from George Stephanopoulos about the wealth transfer involved, that RichCare actually is a pretty good name. But first, here's the data download clip with some really good numbers from Chuck Todd and NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
The winners and losers of the new House Republican plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. In fact, we're going to take a closer look at this with a county-level analysis from the Kaiser Family Foundation and overlay it with a little politics, starting with Clark County, Nevada, home to Las Vegas. Clinton, by the way, carried the county with 52% of the vote. Under the Obamacare, ACA, a 60-year-old making $40,000 a year qualifies for a federal subsidy of $4,380 per year for a mid-level insurance plan. Under the proposed House Republican plan, they would just get a flat credit of $4,000, which means they'd have to find another $380 more per year out of their own pockets. Now, let's move over to rural Northumberland County, Pennsylvania. Donald Trump won this county with 69% of the vote. With Obamacare, the same 60-year-old qualifies for a subsidy of, ready for this, $11,150. With this new House Republican plan, he or she would get just $4,000. It's that same $4,000 tax credit, which means they'd have to dig out more than $7,000 out of their own pocket to pay for additional coverage. Let's look at 81% of the counties that voted for Hillary Clinton overall. In fact, a 60-year-old making $40,000 a year would see their subsidy decline overall. The same would be true in 93% of the counties carried by President Trump. In fact, Trump counties would also see bigger subsidy cuts. This is a point that many Democrats have been making. In fact, here's another way to look at it, which is two examples from the New York Times Upshot. Those who stand to gain at least $2,500 in subsidies, they were split in November 47-46, Clinton over Trump. But those set to lose anywhere from $5,000 to $7,500 in federal assistance for health care, they voted 60-35, Trump over Clinton. So in other words, financially, in this plan, it's Trump folks that get hurt more than Clinton voters. Look, President Trump and Republicans in Congress were elected largely on one of the promises being to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Trump's strongest supporters may get the repeal that they wanted, but higher costs could come as part of that deal. Coming up, why the Trump...
So those are some really revealing numbers from the Kaiser Family Foundation and NBC's Meet the Press putting it together in their data download, because I think it kind of is the explanation for what I was talking about earlier, and I think this isn't some like great insight on my part. I think at least one or two pundits on the shows mentioned it in clips. I normally don't take pundit clips, but I definitely agree with those who say that one of the reasons Donald Trump is letting Paul Ryan and the House Republicans take the lead, and why he may be like willing to negotiate and switch sides, is because he realizes that the way things stand now, he's screwing his own voters, like the white non-college educated Rust Belt voters that Chuck Todd was just talking about there. So that's why I don't think we are seeing Trumpcare or the American Health Care Act or whatever it's going to end up being called in its final form. And when it comes to the wealth transfer and the loss of coverage, the next clip I want to show, this is a really long battle between George Stephanopoulos and the director of the Office of Management and Budget, Mick Mulvaney. And you'll see George Stephanopoulos actually starts off with this clip from AARP saying why they are opposing this, and with AARP opposing it, that's a big problem. I saw people talking about that down in the comment section, and you'll see a clip of the AARP advertisement where they're saying it's basically an age tax, and it's probably not a good sign that the Trump official starts off with a big dig at AARP. That's not a good way to start this up, saying that, oh, they think that Republicans are pushing Granny off a cliff or whatever, or they were behind some ad. That's probably not the best negotiating position. And then he does the same dodge you saw earlier where they talk about coverage, and instead he's trying to say, oh, access to care. We want people to get care, not coverage, as if there's no correlation between coverage and care, as I will discuss with you after we watch. This is almost 5 minutes long. It's the longest clip, but you'll see it takes a long time for where George Stephanopoulos is trying to get him to admit to the wealth transfer and to the lack of coverage, and he's just not having it, as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together here.
The AARP, they've put out an ad where they're saying this bill is going to be an age tax on middle-income Americans. Let's listen.
It allows insurance companies to charge an age tax on older Americans. Combined with fewer tax credits, this could mean an $8,000 a year premium hike on those who can least afford it. Unacceptable. Second, the bill gives big drug companies a sweetheart tax break while doing nothing to help lower drug costs for everyday Americans.
In the meantime, the New York Times is reporting that the Joint Tax Committee concludes that your bill will provide about $157 billion in tax cuts to people with incomes over $1 million in the next 10 years. Yet, older Americans, middle-income Americans, are going to be paying more for their insurance. How is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's the same group, the AARP, that did the television ads of a guy that looks a lot like Paul Ryan pushing Granny off the edge of a cliff back when we first started talking about budgetary reforms back in 2010. And my guess is that the millions of emails that group and other groups are sending out today have a little click here to donate button at the bottom. They're not in the news business. They're not in the business of fixing things. They're in the business of trying to protect their own self-interests and to raise money, and that's unfortunate that's where a lot of folks will get their information. Look, we promised to repeal the taxes for Obamacare. That's what the bill does. I think we should focus more on the benefits that folks are going to get from the improved health care, the affordable health care, not just affordable health coverage, that this new level of protection, this new bill would provide.
But they're pointing out that older Americans, especially those from the ages of 55 to 64, are going to be paying more because insurance companies will be able to charge them more.
And I seriously doubt that any of those analyses take into consideration the fact the use of HSAs, health savings accounts, the lower premiums that come from competition. These are a group of listen, everybody's got skin in this game, right? Everybody has an interested party, and they're trying to protect their own. What we're trying to do is make things better for as many people as we possibly can, and right now the bill's doing exactly that.
But the burden may be falling hardest on older middle-income Americans, and your critics are saying this is a massive transfer of wealth from lower-income Americans to upper-income Americans when you combine the tax cuts with the loss in subsidies for middle-income Americans.
Well, I'm not sure where they're getting that. A massive transfer of wealth. George, what we're doing is making sure that the truly indigent still have care. Medicaid is still there. In fact, we think it's going to be even better. The people who are just above Medicaid but still have difficulty buying their own premiums will not only have the refundable tax credit, but they'll have the ability to use HSAs to pay for their health care on a tax-advantaged basis, just like you and I get. So I don't understand the criticisms lobbed in that fashion. The bill actually helps a great many people and helps them get something they need, which is health care, not health coverage.
Millions are going to be paying more, and the wealthy are going to be getting a tax. But let me move on now to the State of the Union. And the President...
George, I'm sorry, I won't let you move on from that. I mean, you're taking that as if it's gospel truth. That's the argument of a group of people who don't like the bill. So we repeal the taxes in Obamacare. It's what the Republicans have done from the very beginning. The fact that certain groups will pay less tax is not central to the issue. We've done this in a fashion that allows the people who cannot afford health care now to get it. I don't know why some people are so dead set against other people benefiting at the same time.
But those who are getting, those who are getting subsidies right now, they're going to be getting fewer. The tax credit is going to be worth less than the subsidies, and insurance companies are going to be free under your bill to charge older Americans more.
And you're falling into the exact same trap I talked about at the opening of this segment. You're worried about giving people coverage, and it's almost as if
the president said he wanted everyone covered, sir. The president said that.
He wants everybody to get care.
That's not what he said. The president said he wants everyone covered.
What people want is to get care. People want, when they get sick, they want to be able to afford to go to the doctor. And that's where Obamacare has failed them several times over. That is the problem that we are fixing, so that when you're watching this program, when you get sick, you can afford to go to the doctor, because right now in Obamacare, you can't. I had it, George, I know. I've lived through this firsthand. You didn't have Obamacare. I did. $12,000, $15,000 of deductible for my family. Luckily, we could afford it. But people making much less than I did had that exact same plan. Yes, they got a subsidy in order to buy that plan, but they didn't get a subsidy on their deductible. They could not afford to go to the doctor. That was a broken system. That was one of the many, many reasons that Obamacare was failing, and people are begging us to replace it, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Finally, Congressman Cummings is all.
So you see there the Trump administration director of the Office of Management and Budget is not really willing to admit that Trump promised that there would be more people covered under his plan, even though you saw from the previous news from the ABC introductory clip, they showed Trump saying that. And that is one of the promises he made in the campaign. Not that we necessarily believe anything Donald Trump said on the campaign or at any other time, but I think it just shows that what the House Republicans are doing is not the something terrific that Trump was talking about when he campaigned. And you can basically see the same thing happen with Paul Ryan when he was talking to John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation this morning, where he does this whole disingenuous thing like, well, you know, I can't really remember. What did Donald Trump promise when he was campaigning? You know, did he really say that? I can't remember all of his promises. And he tries to make the same argument then about the difference between, you know, it's not who we cover, it's who can get care, which I don't know. I mean, anyone can go into an emergency room and not get turned away and get care if they have, you know, under EMTALA, which is, what is that, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, something like that. I think I got that right. Someone will have to look it up. But it basically says that emergency rooms, if you have an emergency and you're not, until you're stable, they can't, if you have an emergency, something that needs to be treated, or you're in labor, they can't turn you away until you're stable. Then they can transfer you. They can charge you for it later, but they have to treat you. So I guess people have care, but the question is, do they have coverage? And, you know, do they have the coverage that keeps them healthy rather than having to go to the emergency room, which didn't even get brought up, I don't think, on any of these shows this morning. But like I said, the next clip is Paul Ryan disingenuously saying he did not remember what Trump promised in the campaign, and then trying to talk about care rather than coverage on CBS's Face the Nation this morning here.
A lot for this legislation. He said everybody will be covered. He said costs will go down. You will be able to pick your doctor. Even in company insurance plans, you can't pick your doctor. There are limits on that. He said that you'll be able to pick whatever plan you want. He's overpromising. You can't do all that.
Look, here's their point.
But you agree, he's overpromising.
Well, I can't speak to all of those. I don't know exactly all that he said. He said we will repeal and replace Obamacare with a better system, and one that gives people better access to more affordable choices, and you pick what you want. We're not going to have that. Read his speech that he gave to Congress just a few weeks ago. That speech perfectly encapsulated what we are achieving here. And I think people are missing the historic nature of this. We're taking one entitlement that's going bankrupt, Medicaid, where more and more low-income people don't even get access to a doctor, and we're giving it back to the states so that they can experiment and innovate and make it work better for low-income citizens. Then we're taking another entitlement, Obamacare, which is crashing and blowing up our fiscal problem, and repealing it and replacing it with good tax policy that equalizes the tax treatment of health care and gives people more choice and more freedom. That means lower costs across the board so you can improve access.
I want to get to that, some of that in a minute. The president...
So you can see Paul Ryan basically has the same dodge that you heard from the Trump administration officials, that, you know, it's about expanding choice and care, even though less people are going to have coverage and people are going to have lower subsidies in order to get coverage, and that means that they have fewer choices. At least seems that way to me. I don't know how you can argue otherwise, although you are free to go ahead and try down in the comment section if you want. But then the next clip I want to show is one of the Tea Party Freedom Caucus conservative Republicans sort of showing the opposition to Obamacare, or not Obamacare, Trumpcare, or the American Health Care Act from the conservative side, where basically it's not tough enough on poor people, because you'll see, this is from Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace asked, this is Representative Jim Jordan, the one of the founders of the Freedom Caucus, so he's like one of the head Tea Party guys in the House of Representatives, and he's asked about the two things that help poor people still in this latest healthcare bill. One is refundable tax credits, which means, if you remember from when Mitt Romney ran, there's like the 47% of Americans that don't pay federal income taxes. If you don't pay federal income taxes, a non-refundable tax credit doesn't help you because there's nothing that you're getting a credit from. But if it's a refundable tax credit, it actually adds to your tax refund. So you get the money whether you're paying a federal income tax or not. And people who don't pay federal income tax pay other taxes. But anyway, so Jim Jordan does not want that because that helps too many poor people. And then Medicaid expansion. But he's still saying it's a great way to expand choices, even though my interpretation of this response is like Tea Party Republicans hate poor people is at least the policies you'll hear from Representative Jim Jordan on Fox News Sunday this morning in this clip.
You and other conservatives in the so-called Paul Ryan bill. One of them is the refundable tax credits, which you call a new entitlement and a substitute for subsidies. But other conservatives and Tom Price, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, say, look, people who get their health insurance on the job get a tax break because that benefit is not taxed. This is just treating people who buy health insurance on the individual market the same way. It's a level playing field.
Fair enough, Kristen. We've been fine with tax credits. Our concern is you want to give tax credits to people who actually have a tax liability. If you don't, it's nothing more than a subsidy. What we really are focused on is we want to bring back affordable insurance. Not just have some subsidy for the government to buy some plan that the government approves, not to put more people on Medicaid, but to actually have those working class families be able to shop for a plan, an affordable plan that meets their family's needs. That's a much better option than signing people up for a government type program. So that's what we're focused on accomplishing.
Well, all right. Before we get into that, let me ask you about another aspect of the repeal and replace plan, which is Medicaid expansion. Now, the White House and Paul Ryan are talking about phasing that out, the expansion that has allowed millions, 11 million people to get health insurance who didn't have it before Obamacare. They're talking about phasing that out by 2020. You want to end it right away. Isn't that going to create chaos and throw millions of people off health insurance?
Chris, the plan we passed that every Republican supported last Congress said there's a 2-year effective date. So you would repeal Obamacare, but there's still 2 years transition time. Everyone knows you need a transition time to bring back a marketplace. So again, I don't view success as keeping Americans on Medicaid. I view success as bringing down the cost of insurance so families can pick the plan that fits their needs. That's what we're doing. We have a 2-year transition time for that. And again, remember what we told the voters. We said we were going to repeal Obamacare, not keep Medicaid expansion around forever. We said we were going to repeal it. So let's do that. Let's be consistent with what we told the American people we were going to accomplish when they sent us here to Washington.
Here is what...
Now, this is what Medicaid expansion means for those who don't know what they're talking about. Under Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, one of the ways that they increased coverage was by paying states to expand Medicaid coverage up to 150% or even up to 200% of the poverty level, because it's not just people at the poverty level, which is not a very high wage to just be right above the poverty level. Families that are within 150% to 200% of the poverty level, they can't afford health insurance either, and even the subsidies aren't necessarily going to get them into the insurance market. So that's why states could expand their Medicaid, which is for poor people who can't afford insurance, gives them some coverage. They can expand those up to people who make 150% or even more over the poverty level, to 200% of the poverty level. So that's one of the ways that coverage was expanded over Obamacare, and that's something Jim Jordan obviously does not like, the fact that those people can qualify for Medicaid. He wants to give them more choices. Why, if they could afford to buy private insurance, do you think they would go on Medicaid if Medicaid is so bad? I don't know. And then you heard what he said about the refundable tax credits, because that's just a subsidy. Like, anyway, I don't really understand why the Freedom Caucus Tea Party Republicans are so opposed to that, but you can let me know if you understand it down in the comment section. I want to move on to 2 more clips from Republicans. This is from one from Rand Paul and then one more from Tom Cotton. First, Rand Paul, I think, makes an important point here about how the negotiations are going to go forward with this bill. His theory is that it's going to become clear that they don't have the, I think it's normally would be 218 votes, but I think it's down to 216 because of vacancies in the House of Representatives. So I think they need 216 votes to pass it, and once it becomes clear they don't have that, that's when negotiations begin, according to Rand Paul, and then he gives his ideas as to what repeal and replace should look like. Talking to John Dickerson on Face of the Nation this morning here.
I hear from him that he's willing to negotiate. You know what I hear from Paul Ryan? It's a binary choice, young man. But what does a binary choice mean? His way or the highway? There are 2 choices.
Well, I think his argument would be the binary choice is you do this now through reconciliation, a Senate process that's kind of a pain, and then you have a second piece of legislation.
What we're hearing is a binary choice is it's the Ryan plan or the status quo. And what he's rammed through his committee is his without any amendments. And that's the question. If we get what we've got from Ryan, Obamacare Light, he will not have the votes. And we have to get to that point before true negotiations begin. Right now, I think there's a charm offensive going on. Everybody's being nice to everybody because they want us to vote for this, but we're not going to vote for it.
You talked to I'm going to get to the Senate in a second, but you said you spoke with the president. Where do you think he's willing to negotiate on these issues that you've highlighted?
I don't think the president is rigid in support of the House bill. I think he's open to seeing how we can get consensus. And what I've told the president is what I'm telling everybody. We're united on repeal, not so much on replacement. We do not agree with the fundamental 3 or 4 things that Ryan has: subsidies, taxes, mandates, and insurance bailout. That's Obamacare. We don't want that. If you take that off, what do you have? You've got repeal. Now, what you do to help people...
Can you do just repeal by itself?
Well, no, I would do replacement in a separate bill, because what I would do through replacement is there are 2 things you have to do to fix the individual market. You have to tell people that they can buy any kind of insurance they want, so you get rid of the mandates on what it goes into insurance, but you also have to allow for people to join a buying group. If people join a healthcare association or a co-op...
Right, that's part of the Ryan plan,
That drives down... It's not in the Obamacare Light proposal.
It's in the second set of legislation.
But the reason they have to be discussed at the same time is CBO is going to come out and say a lot of people are not covered.
Right.
So how are we going to cover them? I would cover them with something much better than Obamacare, and that would be joining a co-op to drive down prices, but also to get guaranteed issue where you won't be dropped.
Let me ask you a question. You said that there...
So there you can see Senator Rand Paul give his idea as to what is a better replacement for Obamacare, and also his theory that this is just a starting point for negotiations, because there aren't going to be enough votes in the House of Representatives to even repeal unless they get rid of all the parts of the replacement that are Obamacare light, like the tax credits, like the Medicare expansion that I was talking about. And the final clip I want to show is another senator. This is Senator Tom Cotton again. And in this clip, he even goes a step further and predicts that if what Rand Paul says doesn't happen, and this may be why Rand Paul is correct. Senator Rand Paul makes this statement that they aren't going to pass the current bill. They're going to find out there aren't enough votes, and then they'll pass something much more conservative, much more Tea Party. And Senator Tom Cotton goes a step further and says if they do pass what they have now and try to get it through the Senate, there's no way it's going to go through the Senate, and they're going to get burned just for voting for it. And he even makes this BTU analogy I will talk about with you after we watch this last clip for the broadcast tonight over here.
You're listening to Director Mulvaney right there. He says this is just a framework. This is the framework for repeal and replace. You're going to have the chance to fix it in the Senate. Can this bill be fixed?
George, the bill probably can be fixed, but it's going to take a lot of carpentry on that framework. As it's written today, this bill in the House of Representatives cannot pass the Senate, and I believe it would have adverse consequences for millions of Americans, and it wouldn't deliver on our promises to reduce the cost of health insurance for Americans. So I would say to my friends in the House of Representatives with whom I serve, do not walk the plank and vote for a bill that cannot pass the Senate and then have to face the consequences of that vote. George, you were in the White House in 1993. You remember when House Democrats voted for a BTU energy tax. Not only did that not become law, it didn't even get a vote in the Senate. And many of those Democrats lost their next election because they voted on that tax.
So you're
they call
saying
it getting BTU'd. I just do not think that this bill can pass the Senate, and therefore I think the House should take a pause and try to get as close as we can to a good result before they send it to the Senate.
So you're saying House Republicans, if they vote for this bill, are going to pay the price without getting any benefit?
I'm afraid that if they vote for this bill, they're going to put the House majority at risk next year. And we have majorities in the House and the Senate and the White House, not only to repeal Obamacare and get health care reform right, but to reform our taxes and our regulations and build up our military and accomplish many other things. And I don't want to see the House majority put at risk on a bill that is not going to pass the Senate. That's why I think we should take a pause, try to solve as many of the problems on both Medicaid and the individual insurance market in this bill in the House, and then allow the Senate to take its work up.
You heard Director Mulvaney. He disputed your view, your analysis that this bill is going to increase premiums for Americans. He says you're discounting the value of competition.
Well, unfortunately, I just don't think this bill, as written, is going to create the new conditions necessary for the kind of competition that Director Mulvaney and I and virtually every other Republican wants. For instance, this bill leaves most of the Obamacare insurance regulations in place, and it's those regulations that have caused most of the premiums to increase, not just in the Obamacare exchanges, but in the job-based insurance market as well. We share the same goals of wanting to repeal Obamacare and getting health insurance rates down so people can get access to care, but as this bill is written, as a practical matter, I just don't see that competition occurring as it needs to.
You also heard Director Mulvaney on this.
So anyway, I said that was the last clip of the show, but I actually have one bonus Sandy clip I'm going to show. Sandy showed up during that last clip. But before I show the Sandy clip, I just wanted to comment that what Senator Tom Cotton said there, first, it's like what I said, maybe the reason that Senator Rand Paul is correct, that this House bill is just a negotiating position and they're not going to actually pass it. But it also comes up with like a dream scenario where the House actually does pass this bill and then the Senate kills it and the whole thing falls apart, and then they go into the 2016 midterms with every member of the House up. I mean, it's really hard to believe that the House could switch hands. It would require huge changes in turnout, but I mean, stranger things have happened, so I mean, that is kind of a dream scenario. And like I said, I did just take a quick video of Sandy showing up during that last clip for the Sandy fans out there. Here you go. So thanks for joining me and Sandy for the show tonight. I hope you enjoyed the clips I picked out and my commentary to make it a fair use media criticism and political analysis show. I'll be back next Sunday, hopefully around the same time, sometime in the late afternoon, evening Pacific time, depending on when I finish picking out all the clips. If you want to support my show, especially with all the videos that YouTube has been demonetizing lately. They're mostly older videos, but there are about 20 of them got demonetized in the last couple weeks. You can support me on Patreon by giving me a monthly contribution at a link I put down in the video description. I also appreciate the 300 or so live people who showed up to just keep me company while I broadcast this, despite that glitch about half an hour into the show, and that I'll probably be uploading the recorded version. Sorry about that. And so you can give me a thumbs up, even if you're watching as a recorded show. Leave me a comment, supportive comment. Tell me what you like about the show. Tell me what I should keep doing, what I should stop doing. And until I have time to make another video, which hopefully I'll make an edited, produced video one of these days, including that Who Cooked Adam Smith's Dinner book review I've been promising for months. You know, once Trump got elected and there was all this extra work with the ACLU, it's really cut down on my video production time, but I will be back at least next Sunday and every Sunday for the foreseeable future, giving my Sunday live clip roundup. And until then, thanks for joining me, and I guess I'll be seeing all of you around